for those of you who would like help with how to teach rotational order rules to young players, whether it's 12s, 14s, freshman level, JV level, or if you're just a new coach and you don't have a lot of experience teaching rotational order to your team, I think this video is going to be really helpful for you. The basic thing that all players need to know and need to understand is the language, the terminology, and also how some things can mean one thing in one context and another thing in a different context. Specifically, a great example would be the letter abbreviation MB. A lot of times that's either going to be referred to as a middle blocker, but it can also be referred to the middle back area or court position. Things like that, it's really important and useful for young players to learn, in the same way they understand that some words have different and multiple meanings. In volleyball, it's the same is true. Some abbreviations and some words have different meanings depending on the context. I always want them to understand, at least in the rotational order that we are going to use, which is your common 6-2 offense, is what I've been teaching them. There's a couple of really important things and distinctions that need to be made. And these things, over the last 3 weeks and 6 practices, I've noticed are not really easy for them to learn or remember. So let me walk you through some of the stuff that we've talked about. The first thing that we've talked about is the rotational order. So for the first half of the 6-2 offense, it will follow setter 1, outside hitter 1, middle blocker 2, opposite 1, outside hitter 2, and then middle blocker 1. When we rotate, one of the things that I've been drawing on the whiteboard and repeating multiple times is that the rotational order is what determines who you have to be in front of or behind or to the right of or in the middle of. What's helpful is for them to learn that the zone positions, area 1, area 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, or court zones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, are also sometimes referred to as court positions. So like the player in court position 4, we scroll up in this example, is the opposite 1 in this given rotation. So we're looking at rotation 1. You can see that the player standing in zone 4, scroll back down to our zone and area map, zone 4 is in fact opposite 1. The next link is that your zone or court position on the floor is also the same as the service order. So for example, in rotation 1, setter 1 is going to be the first server, followed by the outside hitter 1, middle blocker 2, opposite 1, and so forth. And what I draw out for them are 2 things. I draw out for them the court zone area position, court position map. Okay, and I put that on the whiteboard. And I also write out for them the service order. This layout right now, if you look at these smaller boxes, player in zone 1 is the first server. She's the one who's up to serve. The player in zone 2 is second or right up next to serve. The player in zone 3 is third in line to serve. The player in zone 4 is fourth in line. Player in zone 5 is fifth in line. And the player in zone 6 is sixth in line. And so what that might look like would be in a service order. Sorry, I'm trying to type this out. Those of you that coach high school, you know that your sheet looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you would designate the service order or rotational lineup order. Lineup order is, I believe, what they use, a terminology that they use in the rule book. So for rotation 1, starting here with whoever is first, going to go in order of, you can think of it as in order of court zone order or service order, however you want to think of it. because I don't have jersey numbers or player names here, I'm just going to write in service order. So this would be set 1. The player in zone 2 happens to be OH1. The player in zone 3, or third in line to serve, happens to be middle blocker 2. Player in zone 4, or fourth in line to serve, is the op 1. The player in zone 5, or fifth in line to serve, is the OH2. And the sixth player, or the player in zone 6, is going to be the middle blocker 1. So having them understand this, again, it takes time and repeating, and every day that we have practice, we draw it up on the board and I ask them questions so that they have to recall and remember. And, you know, they definitely struggle with the information, but they're starting to get it. Okay, after about 5 practices now, they're starting to get it. Before I move on and to recap, it's important that they understand and that you teach them the court position, zone positions, or area positions. You can call it a map or whatever. Most of them know this, but it's good to review it. Okay, so zones 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It's then helpful for you to relate that and let them know that as we rotate to each rotation, the players who are standing in these zones or in these court positions also matches the service order that we are in. And so let me go back to this first part here. In rotation 1, we have this setup. Okay, I've already described that to you. But when we rotate to rotation 2, or the player who is second in line to serve will then become the OH1. And what they have to understand, what you have to teach the players, is that when you rotate, say to rotation 2, you can see that the player who was second in line or right up next is now the player in zone 1. And so once we've completed a rotate, now the player in zone 1, or the first server, or the player whose turn it is to serve, is now a new skill position player. Okay, so OH1, second in line, middle blocker 2, third in line is now opposite 1, and fourth in line is now the outside hitter 2. So can you follow? Can you see how we rotated from rotation 1 to rotation 2? We've kept the players in rotational order, but now in this example, the skill position player now occupies or stands in or starts in a new court position or a new service order. Okay, so everyone's moved up one spot in the line to serve. This is really important because the player who is right up next to serve or second in line to serve, the player who's right up next also has to be closest to the right sideline, all right, than any other of her front row teammates. The player who just served, okay, the player in zone 1 or right back, right after you serve, you have to be the player closest to the right sideline than any of your back row teammates. Okay, so right after you serve, I need to make sure that I start and stand closer to the right sideline right after I serve, closer to the right sideline than either of my other two back row teammates. Similarly, if you are the player right up next to serve, when you line up in serve receive or on serve, you have to be closer to the right sideline than either of your two front row teammates. The other rotational order rule and overlap rule that is important and necessary to teach players is that the player who is in the front row has to start closer to the net or closer to the center line, as it's written in the rule book, than her corresponding back row player. What that means is the two rights, right front and right back. I've also noticed that for young players, actually, it's easier for them if you say front right and back right. in rotational order, the player who is front row, obviously, right? Or obviously to us, not to them. The player who's front row must start with her feet on the ground in a spot on the floor that is closer physically, closer to the center line or to the net than her corresponding back right player. So that's really important. So if we wanted to move this player up so she doesn't have to pass, that would also mean we could bring this back right, this right back setter, closer to the net as well. The last thing that I think is really helpful that I'm just now starting to use with my explanation to these players is that these court and zone positions never change. As we rotate from one rotation to the next, the skill position players will rotate, and their skill position usually will remain the same, as in I'm still the opposite when we rotate. I'm still the setter, all right? The court position doesn't change, or the service order that matches the zone and court positions don't change. This player who was first in line to serve, as we rotate, she's no longer first in line. The player who is now the zone 1 or right back player, she is now first in line. The player who rotated and is now in zone 2, she is now second in line to serve. And the reason the connection that is so helpful and why it's so important that they understand this is because then you can also, for simplicity, tell them that in whatever rotation we happen to be in, whoever is third in line or whoever is the skill position player in middle front or in zone 3, you must start closer to the net than your teammate who is currently in zone 6 or 6th in line to serve. Okay, so that can be simple and easier to think about instead of having to use the terms like right front, right back, front, middle back, left back. You know, it might just be more helpful for them to understand that as they move and players rotate and move around in a circle, these rules that apply, rotational fault rules that apply, overlap rules that apply to rotational order, like never changes. Okay, so whoever's in zone 2 must be closer to the right than the players in 3 or 4, and must also be closer to the net or center line than who's ever in zone 1. Whoever's in zone 3, we haven't talked about this yet, but they're the monkey in the middle, the front row monkey, right? Monkey in the middle is an easy mnemonic device that's a way to help the players understand. If you're the monkey and you're the front row monkey, you just need to make sure that you're standing in between whoever's in zone 2 or second in line or right up next to serve, and whoever's fourth in line to serve or last in line. This is my mnemonic device that I'm sharing with you. Whoever's last in line out of the front row players must be furthest to the left or closer to the left sideline than any other front row player. So the monkey just needs to make sure that she's in between those two front row players, the right up next player and the right up next to serve player, and the last in line out of the front row players. For the left front and left back, or zone 4 and zone 5, okay, again, it's just easy to think that, you know, whoever is standing in zone 4 or whoever is fourth in line to serve, you must stand closer to the net than your teammate who is fifth in line to serve or who is the player in zone 5. Those players, what we want them to understand, what can I use here? So those players in this example, fourth in line to serve, when she drops back to pass, this player who's fifth in line to serve can move over to make room, and now we have two passers. But the rule, and this green line right now is helpful. This green line is telling us that the fourth in line to serve, the OH2, must have her feet on the floor closer to the center line than this MB1, or this, probably the triangle represents the libero. Okay, because again, remember, These are your corresponding front and back row players, right? So this player, because zone 4 is closer to the net and is a front row zone, and zone 5 is closer to the end line or a back row zone, that is the rule that applies. This middle back, sorry, not middle back, this middle blocker 1 needs to start closer to the back end line, right, than OH2 or the zone 4 player. Really hope that helps. So let's just make this rotation too. Let's play around with it, right? Outside's going to drop back and help pass. This player here, if I can grab the box. Ooh, I want the whole thing. There we go. Can slide over. All right. What else can we do here? This player can step up, and so we're a little bit more even with our serve receive. This player can come back here a little bit, which is pretty common and typical. If we want our opposite to attack on the right side first, again, she's the front row monkey. So we just need to make sure that she is in between the right up next player, okay, MB2, and in between the OH2. Okay, so the underlined players are front row players. So right up next, this player here is closer to the right sideline than any other front row player. Good, check that off. She needs to be, because she's zone 2, she needs to be closer to the net physically than the player in zone 1. So that's another check. This setter 1, she's the back row monkey. So as you can see, she needs to be in between the triangle player, the MB1, and the player who just served in zone 1, the OH1. So she can move. She's pretty much restricted right now. If these two players stay here to pass, she's the setter is restricted, or I shouldn't say restricted, but is free to move anywhere in between these two players. As far as her middle front monkey, or her corresponding middle front player, the third in line, the zone 3 player, was the op1. So she just needs to track who's third in line to serve. Whoever that person is, they need to start closer to the net than me, because I'm the zone 6 player, or I'm 6th in line to serve. So again, it's no wonder that it takes a little while for the players to learn and understand this. It's a lot that you have to explain. If you do it in a way that players can follow along and remain engaged with the information, then they pick it up. Because we don't have 12 players on the team, we also have to modify and simplify things. So a lot of the drills we do is, the title of the video was, half court 1 versus 3 by rotation 1, kinda, right? Kinda, sorta. I teach the players this information, and then I make sure that they understand, hey, because we don't have 6 on 6 or whatever, or we're going to choose to do it in a modified way, we're going to follow the rotational rules, sorta, kinda. Okay, so what I did with them was I had them take this player. He would play on the other side. We used a half court. Okay, so we shrunk everything over, and we tried to set something up like rotation 1. And so I told him, hey, these are the players that we're going to use. They obviously could see how things were drawn out on the board. And I said, why don't we, to continue to work on serve and pass and playing it out, why don't we let this player come back a little bit, and she can help pass if we think that's useful. Okay, but let's make sure that we understand that in zone or rotation 1, this player, who is going to be our setter, must start further back than the player who's right up next to serve, the zone 2 player. So when this zone 2 player drops back to pass, I said I want to make sure that we abide by the overlap rule there. If you've ever played a board game or a family game night, you have to sit down and learn the rules of the game first, right? If you sit down to play cards, deuces, or hearts or whatever, right? If you've never played it before, you have to understand the rules first. Someone needs to explain it to you. And then once you understand the rules of the game, then as you're playing, you can quickly start to pick up on things like strategy, tactics, how do I want to play or make certain decisions to increase or improve my chances of winning. it's the same concept that applies here. If players can understand the rules of the game, then they can start to really focus on how to do things to increase their chances to win. And I'll tell you, 12-year-olds are not too young to learn that concept. Okay, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.